once I was having lunch with a client, as we all do from time to time, and we were trying to impress this client. Haven't really sort of spoken with them much before. We were trying to impress them, and she asked us, what is an insight? There were two of us there, and she asked us, what is an insight? And the question was posed to me in such a way that she already knew the answer to this, right? So it was kind of a rhetorical question, and that she wanted to see if I also knew what an insight was as well. So obviously I was under a lot of pressure, and I can't even remember what I said, but I said something that was completely ridiculous, right? There was no, I couldn't define what an insight was, so I gave some sort of silly, ludicrous answer, right? So I'm not going to repeat that. I'm not going to try and give you some silly textbook, marketing book, whatever definition of what is an insight, because really, there is no definition of what is an insight, right? This is the wrong question. What is the definition of an insight? This is the wrong question. There is no definition of an insight. Rather, what we will discuss, right, in the next few minutes, is the understanding of the relationship between research, insights, right, answers, what we call answers, and marketing, right? So let's begin here by realising something about research and answers. And answers. This is the holy grail, right? What is the answer? What is the answer? Now, this is a real problem because, and I know this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but there are actually no answers. There are no answers because there is no right and wrong, especially in marketing, right? There is no real right and wrong. There are only questions and realisations. There are no answers. So what exactly is a realisation? Again, let's go back to what the word means. What is a realisation? A realisation is making something real. What are we making real? Right? What are we realising? What do we need to realise? We need to realise something that we can't actually see, or something that was previously hidden to us. To realise something means to give it an apparent reality, if you like, yeah? Realising what? What are we realising, right? To a question or a thought, right? Or the thought that was behind the question itself. Now, questions, here's the paradox again, questions are more important than answers, because in the seed of every question is actually, there is an answer in there, right? There's no such thing as a pure question. Questions are not posed as pure questions. There's no such thing, because there is always some kind of thought or some kind of agenda, if you like, behind every question. Therefore, good questions contain within themselves the seed of their own realisation, right? So a question is an expression of a thought in itself. It's not just a question of I don't understand. It's actually a sentiment of the thought itself, right? It is not a statement of the unknown. This is why questions are more important, because good questions, good hypotheses are realisations in themselves, right? So we think, well, this is one of our problems in research, is that we think we're in the answers business, right? We think we're in the answers business, but this isn't right, because there are no answers, right? We are in the realisation business. We're in the realisation business, and it's not just a semantic difference between realisation and answer, right? An answer assumes there are facts, right? And, reality is not that cut and dried. It's basically not that black and white. There are no facts. There's only perception. There's only perception, right? No fact. That's why we supply realisations rather than answer. So what are we talking about? We're talking about an insight is simply a realisation, and a realisation basically comes from a hypothesis or a question. All right? So that's one issue. The other issue is that for every realisation, there is also the realisation that we know less than when we began. Right? So, the paradox of problem solving, the paradox of supplying these so-called answers, is that really, if you've done elegant research, if you've created a good investigation, a good piece of journalism or whatever, you will throw up as many issues, as many hypotheses as things that you supposedly answer, if you like, right? And that was one of Socrates' most famous lines, I think, famous quotes, is that when someone asked him if he knows a lot, or if he's intelligent, or if he knows a lot of things, he said, "I know enough to know that I know nothing." Right? And that's a very, very insightful thing to say, because truly excellent research creates more questions than it answers, because the question is the insight. That's basically where it comes from. So we can say that X and Y is actually happening, but in reality, if we've done our job properly, we should be exposing more issues that we actually need to have realisations about, because questions that we raise, good questions, right, are both questions and answers in themselves, right? So good questions are realizations in their own right. So, and the last thing we want to say about this is that an insight, to develop an insight, right, requires a process, right? So we have insights, you know, while we're sleeping, while we're in the shower. I mean, we have ideas and all that kind of stuff. Sure, that's fine, but that's a bit hit and miss, right? We actually need to understand a process. So we need to go through a process in our research to get to these realizations, right? So you've got to take consumers through a journey. If you want to get, you know, answers from consumers, stop asking them questions. Get the consumer to participate in their own realization about themselves. Now, they might only implicitly realise things about themselves, but that process of realisation with the consumer in the group is really, really important. Because if the consumer realises something about themselves, then so will we as well, right? So that's the thing that we've got to realise. An insight is a realisation, and the consumer must have these realisations, albeit in a kind of a loose way in our group. That's why we shouldn't ask consumers direct questions, because that means that they feel that they're going to give us they have to give us a direct answer back. And there really aren't answers, right? There are only perceptions and only realisations, right? So this is the thing that we've got to realise now ourselves, right? The future of the product is not just in the product itself, right? The future of the product is in the consumer. This is what we said before about the past, the present and the future. The future of the product is in the consumer. The insight to the future of the product, or whatever we're studying, is actually already in the consumer, and we've got to get the consumer to realise it themselves. It's somewhere in their intuition. We've got to get them to get to a sense of realisation so that we can realise it ourselves, right? And again, brandOdyssey, this is what it's all about. This is what it's been constructed to do. It expresses and finds out what there is, but not necessarily known, right? So it finds what there is in there, but not necessarily what is known, easily expressed, or even visible, right? I think we've got to stop using research to confirm the bleeding obvious. You know, by definition, the bleeding obvious is the bleeding obvious. We don't need to confirm that. We need to actually understand and create processes to get realisation from the consumer themselves.